Hello, my name's Steve Lozier. I'm an education specialist in the MSD of Wayne Township, and I'm focused on the planning and implementation of project-based learning units in our schools. This module is one of many designed to help teachers better understand project-based learning and design and develop PBL units to engage and challenge their students. This presentation is available to you by following the link in the My Big Campus bundle, as well as the Google folder associated it, and I'd suggest you open this presentation in another tab in that Google folder, as you may want to pause this video and click on a link or a resource in the presentation to explore further. And please note, if you are new to PBL and building your knowledge, this video would be considered the fourth in the sequence. So our objectives. You will be able to connect prior knowledge about big ideas and essential questions in terms of unit design to new learning, explore the purpose of driving questions or challenges, develop a draft driving question or challenge, and then evaluate and refine that driving question or challenge by the end of this module. So just to review, big ideas and essential questions are a tool that we use to design units around. It's probably a review for you, but big ideas represent the main ideas, conclusions, or generalizations about the concepts and skills in a focused unit of study. They present what is most important or enduring, so what we want students to know by the end of that unit, to know by the end of our course, to know for the next course, to know for life. They connect discrete skills and content within the unit, and they help us make sense of things. And the video there that is linked will take you to I think Grant Wiggins talking about that work. This work comes from the work of Wiggins and McTee. So, big ideas, when we're thinking about drafting those, we have to consider why study this unit, what makes the study of this unit important or universal, what larger concepts or issues underlie this unit, and how is this best used and applied in the real world. So big ideas can be broad in terms of being related to life or topical related to a particular area of study. And so examples, there are handouts in that Google folder I referred to that give you some examples of big ideas and how they're linked to enduring understanding, and then consider thinking about how you would model your thought process in developing big ideas in your content areas. So then big ideas lead to essential questions. Essential questions are based on those. They're arguable, just like driving questions or challenges, and they can't be answered in one sentence. They're thought-provoking, they're student-friendly, they connect the learning to students or the world, they generate insight, and they go beyond who, what, when, where, to how, and to why. And that will make a lot of sense of why this work is so important when we come up with driving questions to engage students and ultimately leverage them to higher order thinking and learning. So why have a driving question? So PBL units are built around a driving question or a challenge. The way I want you to think about those is as a doorway to the inquiry and to the challenge, and the driving question is how students access and engage with the learning, and then ultimately engage with the challenge and the rigor of it. So why have a driving question? Students, it guides their work, it creates interest and or a feeling of challenge, it reminds them each day, why are we doing this today? For teachers, it guides their planning and reframes content and standards or big ideas. It captures and communicates the purpose of the project, and it initiates and it focuses inquiry. And this work actually comes from BIE. So according to BIE, characteristics of a driving question are they're provocative and challenging to students because it is relevant, important, urgent, and otherwise interesting. They're open-ended and or complex. There's no single right answer, or at least no simple yes or no answer. It requires in-depth inquiry and higher level thinking. So even if the question could be answered with yes or with no, students also must qualify that and say why. So it must be getting to that level. They're linked to the core of what you want students to learn, and to answer it well, students will need to gain knowledge and skills you have targeted as goals for the project. So driving questions helps us get to that PBL place of application and use of knowledge in order to answer that question. So here's some elementary examples. Feel free to pause and look through some of those. I've included some Wayne examples. I've included some BIE examples. Here's some secondary examples, again, some Wayne examples and BIE examples, and there's a link there to a living document of driving questions where people have added those. So, in terms of drafting your driving question, this is a strategy that I actually developed when I had my students write their own driving questions, and it seems to work pretty well to be an efficient way to get somebody to draft a driving question very quickly. So if you have post-it notes or 3x5 cards, you can write these on there, or you can just visually think through this as I talk. But you can also go to that website and use what's called the Tubric, which was created by Alfred Solis with BIE. Once he saw me do this activity with students, he went home and engineered a little tube that you can flip through these options in order to draft a driving question. So the idea here is that you start with the question starter. You think about that second column are the stakeholders, so the people who have an interest or a concern or who get paid to address an issue. There's an action, and then finally is the problem or challenge. So your real-world problem, your real-world challenge goes in that final one. And what students or teachers do with this is they move these around and think about the different syntactical ways to construct this question. So take a minute, pause this, maybe construct those 3x5 cards or post-it notes to play with this, or just sit here and write down how can we do this with the idea that you ideally developed in the last module. So once you have that driving question drafted, this is kind of how we'll run it through a filter to tweak it a little bit. So look at it and think of it in terms of, is it too big, and how could you make it more manageable? So this gives you an idea, and these are also from BIE, but how have humans changed the environment to how has our creek changed in the past 40 years? So this question really zeroes in on a local context. It's manageable in terms of the time to examine it as well. And so how have humans changed the world is big and abstract to a specific place and a specific time period to examine the same content. From Googleable to open-ended, so just simply what is epic poetry, to how can I create an epic poem of an important episode in my life. So this question has a nice piece because it has the student as a stakeholder in the question. They have to think about themselves relative to epic poetry. They have to apply their understanding of epic poetry to an episode in their lives, and kids always love examining themselves. Too general to more concrete and challenging. So how do scientists use tools to study ecosystems? To your challenge is to design a natural habitat for a classroom zoo. Too abstract to more relevant and engaging. What is a hero? To who are the heroes again in my life? So putting that student in the question is often very powerful. I think you'll see a thread of that. Too general to more concrete and localized. So what are characteristics of healthy soil? To is our soil healthy enough to support a vegetable garden? That's an example of what appears to be a lower level question. You could simply say yes it is, no it's not, but students are going to need to qualify that to make a claim, provide evidence, and explain how those things connect to persuading someone whether or not it is healthy enough. And then from sounds like a teacher to a student friendly. So how can we use balanced and unbalanced forces to build a roller coaster that demonstrates Newton's laws of motion, to how do roller coasters work? I will point out though that sometimes teachers will strategically put content in the question because once you put that question in front of kids, they then have to say, well, I need to know what balanced and unbalanced forces are in this example, or who was Newton, what's his laws of motion, those sort of things. So sometimes while it may not be as accessible, sometimes it creates a greater degree of inquiry when students don't know that. So this is just to kind of review. So criteria for evaluating your driving question. Will your students find it interesting? And bonus, will they find it intriguing? Will they understand it? Is it open-ended? Does it require a complex answer? To answer it, will my students need to learn important content and skills and apply those, use those? Does it focus on an authentic issue, problem, or challenge? And then bonus, does it create a local context for the project? So we find a lot of power in local problems or challenges like that. So ideally you've kind of drafted a driving question here and run it through that test, and where you would add that on your form is you'd capture that there in box B where you'd put your driving question or challenge. And so this kind of concludes that piece of drafting a driving question. I hope you've got a couple to kind of start with. I'll note that driving questions are kind of like thesis statements in writing or hypothesis. They're always subject to revision, especially as you further develop a unit. And you may find that you need to tweak them to better engage students even in the moment, and that's perfectly fine. So if you're following these modules in sequence, the next one is utilizing an authentic audience or forming a project partnership. Thanks.